Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Sorry we're getting started just a few minutes late, but you're here for the information session on understanding my child's IEP. And with us tonight, we have Amy Todd and Ashley Thoreen from Piqua City Schools. They're going to walk us through a very, very informative session on how to get the most out of your child's IEP. Just a little bit of background. Riverside does these sessions 4 times a year. This is the one session we do on the school age section for families with kids in school. And then the other sessions we do are on stable accounts and trusts, guardianship, and golly, I'm forgetting the last one. Forgive me. Oh, Social Security. So if you're interested in following along with our series, stay on top of what we have on our website and our YouTube channel, and we also share them on Facebook. We'll have a recording of this ready to go on all of those channels as well afterwards. So we look forward to sharing that with you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley and Amy.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy life to join us. We're going to go through a few housekeeping items. This webinar, again, is being recorded, so your line should be muted. Feel free to use the chat feature if you have any questions. Amy's probably going to present most of this, but I'm running the tech side and helping those chat questions. So I'll jump in if there's some really good questions that come through, Amy, so we can get those addressed while we're on topic. So you don't have to worry about looking at the chat. I'll manage that for you. And once the recording's processed, we'll get that up on, we can put that on our Piqua City School website, as well as we'll make sure that's available for Riverside. So let's first take a look at our agenda so we know what we're going to be covering tonight. So we're going to cover what the IEP is, as well as the ETR. Next, the evaluation process and what that team is going to look like. And then we'll dive into a sample IEP and kind of go through section by section to make sure that everybody understands. And after that, we'll cover what's next once your child's IEP is set up and what to look for. And then we'll cover your role during the process of an IEP and throughout their time at school and how that will look. And at the end, if we have enough time, we'll do some Q&A. So we've got a lot to cover. So I think we're just going to jump right on in. And I think the first thing we have to start is a video. So we will let that play. Hello, I'm Ashley Thoreen, the parent mentor for Piqua City Schools. Today I want to talk to you about the alphabet soup of special education, the ETR and the IEP. If you're new to the special education world like I once was, the acronyms can drive you bonkers. But the good news is that I'm here to explain all of this to you. You'll hear 2 things often. One is the ETR, or the Evaluation Team Report, and the other is the IEP, the Individualized Education Program. They're linked. You can't have an IEP without an ETR. Let's learn more about the ETR first. If your child is suspected to have a disability through the school system, your teaching staff will develop a plan for evaluation with you and get your consent. A team of staff, including the school psychologist and other identified service specialists, will conduct some routine tests with your child during the school day. These tests will be presented in one document called the ETR. This evaluation process is completed at least every 3 years between preschool and graduation to determine if a student's eligibility for special education services is still needed. The IEP, or Individualized Education Program, is a guiding document for the services developed based on the results of the ETR for your child. Think of an IEP as a map to a destination. Each road, turn, and pit stop is a section of the IEP. Each section has a goal based on the student's needs and explains what services will be provided for them in order for them to reach that goal. It's the framework for your child's specialized education. In order for your child to receive special education services, they must be identified under one of 13 categories for the state of Ohio. I myself am a parent of a special needs kiddo, and I don't think of this per se as a label, more of a formality of why services will be provided. Regardless of his identified category on his ETR, I just want him to grow, develop, and live up to his greatest potential. His IEP ensures that there's an educational roadmap towards him reaching his potential. For a more in-depth look at the 13 disability categories, please visit the Ohio Department of Education website under Special Education and Disability-Specific Resources. If you are a parent or guardian of a child with special needs and you're looking for more support and resources, please visit your County Board of Developmental Disabilities or www.ohioparentmentor.com.
All right, thank you, Ashley. Actually, that kind of covers it all. So thanks for coming tonight. I think we're done. Just kidding. There's so much more to go with that. So I'm, like Ashley said, I'm Amy Todd. I'm the Director of Special Education for Piqua City Schools, and I am going to go through the rest of these slides. Like we said, if you have an additional question, pop it in that chat box, and Ashley will try to monitor that, and we'll try to get things answered at the end here. All right, so that first step that the video talked about is that evaluation, right? You can't have an IEP without the evaluation first. So how does that process happen? Well, there is a referral for an evaluation that can be made, and that can be made on the behalf of a child from a number of people. Most often it's going to be the school personnel. Now, in a school system, there is this thing called a response to intervention. It's a framework. It's required of schools. So as a student is completing their everyday tasks and their classroom assessments, teachers might notice that a particular student or maybe a group of students are struggling either academically or behaviorally. That teacher responds to that information with changes in the way they're teaching the content or expectations. Now, sometimes that's just not enough. In order to make a difference for some kiddos. And so a teacher may want to work with a small group, and they use another scientific based learning model for a particular concept, such as reading, calculating, self-regulating emotions. When a teacher adds that next level of additional intervention for a student or a group of students, they then progress monitor that student's response to the intervention, hence the name, response to intervention. If it is making a positive impact, they're going to keep it going with hopes of that student mastering whatever it was that they weren't able to before. Sometimes that particular strategy is not making a positive impact. And so teachers will adjust it or to something else, sometimes even to a different intervention. And then they'll progress monitor that one. Now, all of this takes some time. Change like this, it doesn't happen quick. And sometimes an intervention can take 6 weeks of regular daily delivery to show gains or provide enough evidence of no gains. When several interventions have been used and the data has been collected over time, and a student is not responding to that intervention, a school team may decide that they suspect a disability. Well, sometimes a student will be exhibiting some concerns in the home, but they don't display them at school. It's important for a parent to be as specific as possible, stating why you want to refer your child. Sometimes a physician or a clinician can recommend that a parent make a request. I have even seen some physicians write on a prescription pad that a student needs an IEP or a 504 plan, and a school will treat that as a referral and will follow the same steps. Just so you know, an IEP isn't something that can be prescribed by a doctor. If you have any evaluations from an outside source, you're going to want to make sure that you share those with the school because they really help to get the full picture. It's always best to put your request in writing. The 30-day clock, it starts when an administrator or a director, school psychologist receives that request. Now, that may not be the same day that you wrote the request. As for Piqua City Schools, our team of school psychologists will start gathering academic and non-academic data that has been collected, and then they'll meet with the child's current and past educational team to get some more information. They might also ask you to sign a consent for access to any of those outside evaluations if you haven't already shared them, so that they can be considered by the school district. You'll want to be an open book with any outside services so that they can be considered. If the district finds that they don't have enough data to support a suspicion of a disability that might be negatively impacting the student's access or progress in the general education curriculum, then they're going to write what's called a prior written notice to parents of that decision. Now, unfortunately, that document uses the language that the school refuses. And that sounds really harsh, but what the school is really doing is has a justified data-based professional decision that they do not suspect a disability. Now, if the school agrees and suspects a disability, they will set up a meeting with you to get more information. They'll need to determine what disability or possible disabilities are being suspected. They're going to work together to develop a plan for evaluation, and they're going to ask for your consent to perform testing with your kiddo. And at that time, you're also going to receive a prior written notice to parents of that intent. So now that we have an overview, as Ashley shared, of what the IEP is, a process, kind of how that works, let's just take a closer look at who makes up your evaluation team.
If you've just given consent for your child to be evaluated by the school staff for special education, you might be wondering, what's next? Well, no fear. There's a complete team of superheroes ready to help evaluate your child and compile their knowledge into an evaluation team report. These heroes partner with each other to ensure that a thorough evaluation of your child is conducted and presented to you as the parent. Today, I want to share with you who is on this team. First is a school psychologist. They complete a full assessment of your child to determine eligibility for special education and specialized instruction, and then they help interpret the results and identify your child's superpower. Next is a general education teacher. They share information about how your child is doing in their classroom, and they can try new approaches for teaching and report out what has worked and what hasn't in the past. Along with them are the intervention specialists. They may join the general classroom to observe and do testing, and they work next to the general education teacher to establish techniques that may provide a better learning environment for your child. And then we have the school nurse. They will use their superpowers to evaluate a general hearing and vision test for your child. This helps to rule out any potential medical issues that could be a cause for academic performance or behaviors, such as maybe your child isn't able to see long distances, which could cause them to not be able to see the board during class. The related service specialists are a sub-team altogether. They comprise and evaluate areas such as speech and language, motor function, and everyday skills. They include the speech therapists, occupational, and physical therapists. And last but not least, you. Yes, you're a part of this team as well. You're one of the biggest players. You'll be asked to provide information about how your child is doing at home and provide comments, concerns, and share successes too. You're an integral part, and you participate in the ETR meetings as well as the IEP planning meetings. And from time to time, we may call on other superheroes to attend an ETR or IEP meeting. These could include myself as the parent mentor for the district, or other agencies such as Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities or Miami County Board of Developmental Disabilities, as well as other support professionals like Samaritan behavioral health therapists. Just remember, there's an entire team behind you and other professional superheroes to support you and your child through the special education process.
All right, so speaking of that process, let's learn a little bit more about that. So that entire assessment process, it can take up to, but it is not allowed to go over 60 calendar days to be completed, unless there's an unexpected hurdle and the school and the family would come to agreement to extend that time period. Now, each stakeholder will be either assessing your kiddo one-on-one. They might be formally observing them in the classroom. They might prepare an assessment form of data already collected and observations already made, or completing surveys. Parents are often asked to complete background information, paperwork, and then also some social, emotional, or behavioral surveys. The earlier those get done by all involved, the faster the school psychologist can get all the pieces put together to prepare a report. And that report is what is shared or reviewed at the evaluation team report meeting. Now, at this meeting, there's usually a lot of people who present because they have their share their findings. At the end, the team's going to go through an eligibility type of rule out process. This is the federal way to try to safeguard identifying kiddos for a disability when their current lack of academic progress might be attributed to something other than a disability. So for instance, one of the first questions in the rule out is the lack of appropriate instruction. A school has to look at if the child was enrolled in a program that included the essential components of reading instruction, mathematics, and if the child is limited English proficient. This also includes a child's attendance. We got to remember, if they aren't in school to receive the instruction, then they are considered to have a lack of appropriate instruction. Now, once that's ruled out, the team determines if the child meets the criteria for a particular disability category. It's a good idea to review the definition of that suspected disability or disabilities prior to starting the evaluation team report meeting, so that everybody has a focus for what they're listening and considering. You can find those definitions in multiple places. One of them was mentioned in the video earlier. That's the Ohio Department of Education website under special education. And then you click the category called disability specific resources. You can also find them listed at a great website for parents called understood.org. And you can search for an item called the 13 disability categories under IDEA. Now, in the state of Ohio, and to my knowledge, we're still the only ones in the union where the 14th category, called developmental delay, is only allowable at the preschool level. Federally, that category, it can be utilized up to age 9. So if you're in another state, it's possible that they use that disability category. Now, if your child meets that definition based on all of the data collected, the final determination is, do they require, and I put that if I were typing that word, it would be in big, bold, capital letters, because this is a huge crux, and that is, do they require specially designed instruction? Now, specially designed instruction means adapting the content, the methodology, or the delivery of instruction in order to address a unique need that resulted from the disability, or to ensure that your child's able to access the general education curriculum so that they can meet the standards. Now, there are some differing opinions on this issue. There's a law firm, Bricker and Eckler, that they shared with us that across the state, there's some differing opinions. Many court cases have found specially designed instruction was not required for students who were already receiving support, such as breaking down tasks into smaller chunks. They were receiving copies of written instructions, the monitoring of attention, behavior, and homework completion, visual cues that are available to all students. So we circle back around to the idea that we want to be careful, because we don't want to over-identify, and we definitely don't want to over-support. Here's something that I always tell my staff. There is a fine line between appropriate support and too much. If I do for a child what they can already do for themselves, then I am in essence disabling that child. I'm taking away what they are able to do. So we really do have to be cautious of that over-identification. All right, let's assume that the ETR meeting has taken place and they have the IEP complete. We're going to review each section so that when you go into your first or your next IEP meeting, you can feel prepared and ready to discuss this individualized education program for your child. So within 30 calendar days after the evaluation team report, so we came to the table, we had the meeting, right? The child qualified. Within 30 calendar days, an IEP team meeting will be set. Now, this meeting requires a minimum of 5 roles. They can be filled by 4 individuals. If one of those members is unable to attend, then the parents must give consent to go ahead and have the meeting and give their excusal for that particular member. So here's who has to be at the table, right? The 5 roles, again, that can be filled by 4 individuals. A parent. That also includes a student if that student is age 13 at the time of the meeting. So when we would develop a post-secondary transition plan, but definitely a parent, an intervention specialist, a general education teacher, unless the student is in a full special education only, either facility or self-contained classroom. So far that's 3 people. The fourth one is a district representative. And the fifth role, but it could be served by the district representative or the intervention specialist, is an individual who can interpret the instructional implications of assessment results. So it could be done by one of those two. Sometimes that means it's a speech language pathologist at the table. It's a school psychologist at the table. They may be interpreting some assessment results that they've done. We're going to review these sections, albeit very briefly. So follow along if you have your own kiddo's IEP or a model IEP to look at. That way you can take some notes, jot down any questions you might have that we could help you get answered in a follow-up. All right, so on this page that Ashley has up for us, you're going to notice that there's a watermark of the word draft. It gets removed after the document is finalized, but whether your district has that mark or not, I want you to remember that the day that the team comes together to review, it is always in draft form. Additions, deletions, changes, they're all expected to be made at the table as everybody gives input to the document. The draft is really just the first round proposal from the district based on the data and knowledge that they have about your child's needs. So if they send a draft and there's a particular piece that's written in there that you're concerned about, remember, just because it's written doesn't mean it's done. They just drafted what they plan to propose. It's important to review the demographic data here on that front page. Don't get discouraged, please, if it has the wrong address or phone number or the email that's listed. Sometimes our informational systems don't always play nice with each other and things can get pre-populated. We may, as for sure at Piqua, we would steer you to the secretary before you leave that day because they have access into that behind the scenes set of information and they can get it updated for you. In this new way of doing so much remotely and electronically, I would say make sure you're sharing a working, secure email address with the school also. Now, reviewing dates on that front page is another piece of the cover page. The date the team completed, met, signed, the evaluation team report is logged here. And the next evaluation team report, called a reevaluation, will be due within 3 years. That can happen sooner if a school and a parent agree to do that. It just can't go any longer than 3 years. Now, the date of the IEP meeting is recorded here, and the document is marked as to what type of meeting that date represents. If it's an initial or an annual review of the IEP, then the day the team meets to review and sign it is the day the clock starts ticking. The document itself expires on the 364th day after. So the document lasts for a year. Now, a new IEP meeting will have to be drafted and agreed upon to begin before this one ends so that your child doesn't have a lapse in services. Some districts will use that other box in the bottom left-hand corner on the front page to capture some important notices or information that someone may need, like at a first glance. In Piqua, we make sure that you have a notice in that box that your child is eligible for an educational scholarship in the state of Ohio, and that some of the school services will be billed to what's called Medicaid school program, in which if you've given your consent, they'll use your child's name and date of birth just to verify that the reimbursement was eligible. Now, other schools may capture your child's medical concerns here, or if they need to have their glasses with them, maybe their school schedule to show if they were in a small group resource room or general education class, co-taught for support, that kind of thing. Take a minute to check for any errors in your demographic info that you may need to update with the school, and then see what your district includes on the front page in the other box. All right, in section 1, you have your future planning section. Now, this should definitely be a place where your words are seen about what you hope for your child's future. At younger ages, this may be about what you want your child to accomplish in the next few years academically. While for older students, it could develop into a statement on what you see your child doing after they leave high school, such as employment, college, or independent living. It is important to allow your child to have a voice in this box as well. Sometimes we as parents can override what we want for our child, and it doesn't exactly match what they want for themselves. There is room for both perspectives to be captured here. Staff can also incorporate their hopes for your child here too. So the future plan should be driving the IEP regardless of age. Next is special instructional factors. I typically share with families that this works kind of like a table of contents. What is marked yes here means that you're going to see something on the following pages addressing that item, such as do they have behaviors that impede their learning or the learning of others? For example, if this is checked yes, you may see a statement in the profile describing the interfering behaviors. Then there might be a goal, such as instruction on self-regulation strategies. Or you might just see how this need is addressed by way of accommodations in Section 7, such as strategic or preferential seating, verbal cues, frequent breaks, fidget tools, that kind of thing. All right. In your document, you see 5 headers. I have those auto-filled for every document that our staff starts to draft because they're pieces that are important and shouldn't be excluded. There's always more to share, but there really should never be less than these 5. Strengths and interests, what your child likes to do, what they're good at. This information should be collective. It may have come from you, it may have come from staff observations or directly from your child. This is a really good place to add what you know about your child if it didn't get captured already. Take a quick minute to look at your child's IEP. Can you find some interests listed? Can you find their strengths listed? What would you add that isn't already there? If you've thought of something, jot it down so that you can share it at your next IEP meeting. You might find strengths embedded in the rest of the profile when they discuss academics if you can't find them first thing. Now, educational needs. These are typically what was identified in the evaluation team report under the summary section. So it's broadly what qualified your child. The next one is how the disability affects involvement or progress in general education compared to typical peers. This gives us a picture of what's going to be a hurdle for your kiddo. For instance, if basic reading skills or decoding was identified as a need, then for your child to read grade level text at the same pace as their peers is going to be a hurdle. The next one is successful accommodations or modifications. So to keep with the same example of a need in basic reading skills, what might be listed here is that the student uses an app called Google Read and Write in order for them to choose for digital text to be read aloud. Or the student has a bookshare.org account, again, for text-to-speech access for textbooks and trade books. This would include any accommodations or modifications that have been introduced from a previous IEP, ETR, or intervention plans. And then state and district-wide assessments. This would include how your child performed on the Ohio State tests, or the alternate assessment for students with significant cognitive disabilities, or a district test, such as you may have heard the words AIMSweb or DIBBLES or MAP scores or iReady or STAR or Procore. Those are all district level assessment tests. And that's how we measure how your student is doing over time across the year before we get to that final Ohio State test. So take a minute to see if you can find information of your child's performance on any of those assessments. All right, the next section is extended school year services, and they are not the same thing as traditional summer school. Unfortunately, it also isn't the thing that many parents of children with autism are looking for, which is that structured summer routine. ESY is determined by data regarding IEP goals and objectives. So looking at the progress report data, the district's data would be telling the team that over extended periods of time, without direct instruction, such as a summer break, a Christmas break, spring break, a student might regress or lose what they'd already mastered. The catch is, did they lose it so much so that it cannot be recouped when the direct instruction resumes, that they are then unable to grow any further? The understanding is that all children identified with special needs or not will regress when they're not in session. So the key on ESY is if the amount of regret is the amount of regression, and if there's an inability to be able to recuperate that. In this unprecedented time with the pandemic and all that, when children were forced into the remote learning options, the state addressed that data regarding ESY should be reflective of what was documented prior to COVID. So considering a typical school year and break. This last school year and still moving into this school year, it was really all about monitoring our students for lost learning due to COVID and how that rate of recovery is looking for those back in session. Piqua was lucky enough to be live all year last year. Some districts continue to be remote, so they are back live this year, and they're going to continue to be monitoring that lost learning. If the team does not feel that they have enough data to make that decision to support needing ESY services for a particular goal or objective, or not enough to decline it either, to refute the need, then the team might choose to set a date to revisit this item after data collection over, say, the next Christmas break and spring break. All right, in the state of Ohio, if on the day the IEP meeting is held, your child is age 13, then that means they'll turn 14 in the life of that IEP. So they are required to have a full secondary transition plan in place. Here's a few things to note about this section. The goal is set by your child and you. It should be written using the word will, not the word might. It is also meant to be accomplished after they graduate from high school. In the age-appropriate transition assessment box, you should see information about what your child completed or participated in to get this information, such as maybe they did an informal survey with the intervention specialist. Maybe they did a website activity on Ohio Means Jobs. They may have taken an employability and life skills assessment. There are just a ton of other things that staff can use to get information about your child and as it pertains to post-secondary. Now, this section should include PINs, P-I-N-S, preferences, interests, needs, and strengths of your child in relation to training and education, competitive integrated employment, and then finally, independent living skills. So the services and activities are the things that the school staff or maybe an outside agency such as Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities will provide to your student, provide or facilitate while they're still in school in order for them to meet their goal after high school. In the box labeled person or agency responsible, only school staff or agency should be listed there, not your child and not you. This section is about what we plan to do for and with your child to get them prepared to meet their goal. Again, if you have an IEP with you, take a minute to look at your kiddo's IEP in the person and agency responsible section. Are you or your child listed there? If so, I want you to make a note about that for your next IEP meeting. Let's take a look a little bit further into transition planning with this short video.
Hi there, I'm Ashley Thoreen, the parent mentor for Piqua City Schools, and today I want to talk about transition planning. Transition planning helps students who have an IEP plan and prepare for life after high school. In Ohio, when a student turns 14, there must be a transition plan in the IEP. Now, planning isn't just about education in the future. It covers daily life skills and jobs also. The purpose of transition planning is to help your child set goals as a young adult. Goals are written with a result in mind, meaning that these goals are SMART. While goals for students in middle school might look more general, they will become more specific as a student progresses to high school. And don't worry if these goals change over time. As a student's interests and strengths change, so can their plan for the future. For all students, being a young adult after high school looks different. Some want to go to college for a degree, and others want to get on-the-job training. Some are interested in outdoor part-time work on a team with a job coach support, and another may want to work full-time indoors with less colleague interaction. Students and families may plan for their adult children to remain in their home living as independent as possible, and others may want to get a place of their own with a friend. It all depends on their abilities, their wants, and needs. Staff will help your child determine their preferences, interests, needs, and strengths with age-appropriate transition assessments, and then design services and activities that are special to your child to help them be able to meet their goals for life after high school. The first step is to create a future goal for training or further education. Sometimes a student may be interested in several options. The staff member may ask them to pick one to focus on for now, but know that it can change over time. The next step is to set a goal for future employment. What kind of job does your child dream of? Maybe they can't think of any, or they can't narrow it down. They may just know that they want to work full-time, and that's okay. And last is independent living. It's important to take an inventory of what your child has learned to do for themselves and what still needs to be taught. A lot of this is taught at home, but sometimes the school staff can help with things such as how to read a recipe or balancing a checkbook. Students are encouraged and by law required to be invited to an IEP meeting where transition services will be discussed. Once your student turns 18, which is the age of majority in Ohio, the consent for the IEP will be transferred over to the student. For more information about transfer of rights and the age of majority, please visit our website. Transition planning is all about a network of support, and not all transition services can be provided by the school. It really starts with the family and helping your child build self-advocacy skills. Often, specific services are provided by outside support agencies such as the County Board of Developmental Disabilities, or Riverside, or Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, OOD. These support agencies, with your consent, will be invited to attend your IEP meetings to explain their services and options to you and your child. Just remember, transition planning is key for your child and will help them ensure that they are getting everything they can from their education.
All right, so we are moving into section 6. With this section, you're going to see present levels of performance, annual goals and objectives specific to an area of need: reading, math, writing, organization, and behavior. So the very first piece of the present levels of performance, otherwise known as the plop. So these statements describe how your child's currently performing and how your child's disability affects their progress in the classroom as compared to typical peers, the standard that should be mastered at that grade level. Now, this is an area that is really hard to have to hear over and over again. I always ask our staff to be very sensitive to this requirement by the state. We aim to focus on what your child is able to do and what they will accomplish next, always growing versus how far they may have yet to go to be at grade level. There should be quantitative data in there, numbers often, to let you know how your child is performing on those skills at this time. Now, as far as annual goals, these goals must contain, and I'm going to ask you to select a goal to look at on your child's IEP and circle, underline, highlight the components that are required as we talk about them. So those goals need to contain a condition under which the behavior will occur. So the situation, the setting, the given material in which the skill or behavior will be performed. So if you can find the word given as a clue for this one. Example is given a mixed set of 10 mathematical problems involving subtraction and addition. For other kiddos, it might have said something like given a number line and a mixed set of 10 yada, yada, yada. But somewhere they're setting the stage, the conditions. The next thing is a clearly defined behavior. So a specific action that your student will be expected to perform. So what you're looking for here is one verb, and it usually follows the word will. For example, given a mixed set of 10 mathematical problems involving subtraction and addition, Ashley will independently solve. The next piece is the definition of mastery. That includes both the level of degree, which might look like a percent, and the level of mastery. So the number of times the skill or the behavior is going to be performed. Now here you're looking for how well, and then how many times will they have to perform it that well in order to be determined or deemed mastered. So for instance, we're going to keep going with our example. Given a mixed set of 10 mathematical problems involving subtraction and addition, Ashley will independently solve at least 3 of each operation accurately on 3 work samples per quarter. So you could hear some quantitative measurement there. In this example, I would expect to have seen up in the present level, the section above it, the number of addition and subtraction problems that my child currently is able to solve with help and or independently. Again, back to the IEP you have with you, take a look at your child's first goal. Put your finger on the mastery level information in the goal. Find those numbers, find that expectation. Now I want you to slide your finger up to the present level section and see if you can land on the matching baseline data. So again, where I gave the example of able to independently solve 3 of each operation accurately on 3 work samples, the parent should be able to slide up to present levels and see how many that student can solve now on how many work samples. If it's not there, take a note to look for that on the next IEP. All right, the next piece are objectives or benchmarks. Now, these are smaller steps that your child will need to make in order to reach their goal. They're written in the same way. They represent that step-by-step learning that will have to happen along the way in order to reach the goal. So in our example, that may be that one objective is to able to identify number symbols on a number line. Another objective might be to demonstrate the relationship between addition means a higher number and subtraction means a lower number. So to the right or left on a number line. And maybe another one is able to identify the symbols that represent addition and subtraction. Those are all objectives, things that your child would have to learn in order to, by the end of a year of instruction, be able to perform addition and subtraction problems. All right, this next section, section 7, I think of this section as my prescription in a medical model, right? If I went to the doctor and I desired to lose weight, that's my future planning. My doctor would start by getting my history and my vitals. That's my profile. Then we would determine that I need to lose 20 pounds and lower my cholesterol level. Those are my goals. Now comes the plan for how am I going to reach those goals. I need to do 20 minutes of exercise 5 days a week. I need a caloric intake under 1,200 daily, and I need to do a weekly check-in with my dietitian. Those things would be my specially designed instruction or services in order to get to meet my goal. So section 7, this is a list of services and supports that your child will need in order to be successful and learn. This will tell you what specific help your student is receiving at school. It will include what they're doing, by whom and where, and also it will include how long and how often. So some examples of related services that you see there are speech and language, occupational therapy, physical therapy. The assistive technology section, that's going to describe any devices or tools that are needed to aid for your child to have access to the curriculum. Now, this does not include brand names. So like instead of writing the word iPad, because that's an Apple product specifically, it should read like a tablet. And it's not always something electronic. We have students that in order to be able to write appropriately, they need to use a slant board for writing. So that would be an example of assistive technology that needs to be provided at school for your student. The next section is, it includes accommodations. Those are changes in how a student is being taught, and modifications. Those are changes in what is being taught. The next section is section 8. There we go, 8 and 9. So transportation, and related services, and non-academic and extracurricular activities. So Section 8, this will determine if the child has needs related to their disability that are going to require some special transportation, and if accommodations or modifications are needed while being transported. So just like the aim for your child is to be as independent and included as possible in life, we want to consider that same strategy in transportation. Can they safely get to a bus stop? Can they get themselves onto the bus? Can they stay safely seated on a bus? Where do they need accommodations along the way for any of those questions in order to ride a general bus? Now, Section 9 is non-academic and extracurricular activities. This section addresses the need for accommodations necessary in order for the child to participate in their services and activities that are outside of the classroom. This ensures that your child does not experience discrimination due to their disability. So, for example, do they need noise muffling or canceling headphones for assemblies? If they happen to have a one-on-one aide at school, will they need a one-on-one aide for involvement, say, in an after-school club? Is your child getting access to a written copy of video or verbal whole school announcements? Often it will be listed here that you can access a school website for information regarding extracurricular activities. All right, so we're moving on to Section 10 and 11. Section 10 is general factors. This is kind of like a checklist for the team to review all factors that have been considered when writing the IEP. The checklist includes, did we cover the strengths of the child? Did we, parents, have we addressed the concerns that you've shared with us? Did we talk about the results of the most recent evaluation for your child? If it's appropriate, did we look at the results of any state or district assessments? And have we covered kind of holistically the academic, the developmental, and the functional needs of the child? And then there's a yes or no regarding the third grade reading guarantee. So again, with that piece of legislation in place, we have to make that determination of, is your child on track for reading? Although this section might be pre-slugged in the draft that comes to you, make sure you're able to verify that. So you say yes to each item. If for any reason you're unsure whether that was covered in the IEP meeting and all the pieces that you just had, you might want to ask the facilitator to remind you where that information was in the document. All right, now Section 11. This section justifies why students might receive some special education services over here away from their non-disabled peers. And if they attend the school they would typically attend if they weren't disabled. So LRE, least restrictive environment, means that to the maximum extent appropriate, students with disabilities should be educated with their typical peers. It is our obligation to you and your child to serve them in the general education environment and engage them with their non-disabled peers as much as is appropriately possible. Times when it may not be appropriate, safety concerns for your child and others, overwhelming environmental stimuli, they might need a quiet space, articulation, specialized equipment access. These are all some of those reasons why we may have to remove from the general population for a bit. Sometimes a significantly modified curriculum, such as that for students that are taking the alternate assessments. Okay, we're going to look at Section 12, which is statewide and district testing. Now, this section determines if the student will participate in classroom, district, and state assessments with accommodations, such as extra time not to pass one school day, small group. So in order to use accommodations here on state and district tests, a student must need and use those accommodations regularly in the classroom. So keep in mind, there are also some accommodations that are not allowable on certain tests. Now, the biggest culprit of unrest in this area is on the Ohio State tests. The read aloud accommodation is only allowable for students with a print disability. So those that are completely unable to decode any print and require all text to be read aloud in all environments. Honestly, there are very few kiddos who qualify for this accommodation since the test is measuring their ability to independently read and comprehend. So we have students that may really, really, really struggle to decode, but they're getting intensive services. They're working on that. They are able to pick up letters that match sounds off a page. They just may not be able to do it very, very well. But in that instance, they wouldn't qualify to have that test read aloud. It is allowable on other sections of the test, so math, science, social studies, because those aren't measuring the reading ability. All right, so section 13. These are the exemption section. This section guides the team in deciding if the child will be exempted from testing requirements. Now, the team will check the appropriate boxes and answer the guiding questions to determine the appropriate course. The third grade reading guarantee guidelines, they're available on Ohio Department of Education website for if you need more detailed information on those exemptions. For graduation tests in section 13, the team is required to provide written justification of the team's decision to excuse a student from the test requirements. Again, you definitely want to go to the Ohio Department of Education for more information on that and on the new, well, they aren't new now, but they will, as of right now, they're not changing again. And those are graduation pathway, the graduation pathway or requirements for graduation. A student should access the assessment, and then the team should use the results along with the evaluation team report and some district academic achievement data to make a determination regarding exemption. Right now with the state at the high school level, graduation tests, Algebra 1 and English Language Arts 10 or 2, they call it, but it's done at the 10th grade. Those two tests are required to pass at a level of competency for graduation. Students have to take that test. If for any reason they don't pass it, there's to be some intervention or continuing education in those areas, and they would have to test a second time in order to be eligible for that exemption from having to pass it. Move to section 14, and that's meeting participants. This section includes the names and the signatures of those that participated in the IEP meeting. This only shows participation in the meeting, not necessarily agreement. So if somebody were to sign here, we've had parents who are upset about a meeting and they don't want to sign anything. But remember, this section just says that you were present. This is not where you're signing your agreement. Section 15 is where that happens on an initial IEP. So remember that an initial IEP, parents have to sign to give consent to initiate special education or related services for the very first time. They sign to give their consent to initiate that. The other option is they can sign to initiate special education related services in the IEP, except for, and there's a blank there. So a parent can also express, I'm okay with everything that you've proposed, but I don't want this piece. Or you can sign saying, I do not get consent for special education or related services at this time. So remember, you already had an ETR meeting. You gave consent, the team did the evaluation, they came to the table and they said, your child qualifies as a child with a disability under this category. And now they're proposing, here's what we'd like to do to help support them. And so it doesn't take away that the child is a child with a disability. It is only saying, I recognize they qualify and no, thank you. We don't want the help right now. On an annual review, this may be either a change of placement or not a change of placement. In the state of Ohio, a parent has to give their consent for a change of placement on the least restrictive environment continuum. It's not necessarily about a geographical location, but more about a move from a less restrictive, which means with non-disabled peers, to a more restrictive, which means away from their non-disabled peers, or vice versa. Sometimes it may not appear to be a change on the LRE continuum, but it's still enough significant change to the IEP that a district might ask you to sign the change of placement line, such as when I would have a student that moves from maybe an in-class schedule to a virtual schedule, when they're not in a pandemic, of course, or when a student moves from a specialized preschool program and then goes into kindergarten. And also sometimes when a student moves from like their traditional high school to a career tech program, like for us, the Upper Valley Career Center. Those they're just significant enough to the IEP, but it still might be that your child is being served in a general classroom here and a general classroom here, or a resource room here and a resource room here. But it's big enough. We want to make sure that you're consenting to your awareness of how big of a change that is. Parents sign that they agree with the implementation of the IEP, or that they are in attendance, but not in agreement with the following area, and they can sign that as well. Right. So this next page, section 16, is required whenever a student has a vision impairment, so the team can determine the appropriate reading and writing media instructions, such as, does this student need to be instructed in Braille? Typically, this is going to be completed by or with a teacher of the visually impaired. As stated in the administrative code, visual impairment, including blindness, means there's an impairment in vision that, even with correction, adversely affects a child's educational performance. This term includes children who have partial sight and children with blindness. Also, as stated in the House Bill 164, visual disability for any individual means that one of the following applies to the individual. This individual has a visual acuity of 20/200 or less in the better eye, and that's with correcting lenses, or has a limited field of vision in the better eye, such that the widest diameter subtends an angular distance of no greater than 20 degrees. That's a lot of technical information. That information comes from an evaluation done by your eye doctor ophthalmologist. The individual has a medically indicated expectation of meeting the requirements of division of this section over a period of time. So somebody who is progressively losing vision. The individual has a medically diagnosed and medically uncorrectable limitation in visual functioning that adversely affects the individual's ability to read and write standard print at levels expected of the individual's peers of comparable ability and grade level.
All right, thank you, Amy. Okay, so I'll get to the next step here. So progress monitoring. So your IEP is signed and all the participants on the team agree, and your IEP is being implemented. So what then? It's progress monitoring, and you are constantly worried about how your child is doing, if you're like me. I get it. My son has been on an IEP well before kindergarten. Just know that the team is doing everything they can to help your child progress through their education. So let's look at progress monitoring now and what that is and what it should look like. Okay, so goals should always be monitored to check on progress. Each goal is measurable with a data point for mastery that Amy talked about, and each progress report should share data on how far they are towards their goal, and it happens every 9 weeks. Now, keep in mind that some related services are offered twice a month, for example, for a short period of time. So, for instance, my son has occupational therapy. His progress report is in a week, and he's only had 2 sessions with his OT. So the first session they spent getting to know each other because he went to a different building and building that rapport. So they've only really had one real session. So it could be likely that we're not going to get a lot of data or update for this first time, and that's okay. But what I did do, or what I will do, is just have a conversation with her, see how things are going, gather some more data, and then we'll look for more at the next one as well. So that I understand, but there have been times, and some I've heard from parents, they get progress reports saying they're doing great or no progress made. But I want to know, what does doing great mean? Is there data to that? So don't be afraid as a parent if you get that progress report and you're not getting the information that you need from it. the thing I suggest to do is give your teacher a call or ask to convene a meeting with the IEP team just to get better of an update. But explain to them ahead of time, not quite understanding what this progress report is saying. I want to know some more details, and know they should be able to give you that information. I know firsthand as a parent how it can be frustrating at times when you aren't seeing your child make progress towards their goals. But remember, you have to celebrate the small things, and those small things add up to bigger actions over time. I also learned a valuable lesson once: behaviors can impede progress. We had a very rough year for my son, and during that year he made little to no academic progress. It would have been impossible for to sit down and test him on the letters when he was flipping desks at that time. So just know that things happen, but that's okay, and you just keep moving forward. I also think it's very important to keep those lines of communication open and understand the staff's role as well as yours as a parent, which brings me to my next topic, which is your role during ETR and IEP meetings. So I think I have one more video. Yes. Hello, I'm Ashley Thoreen, the parent mentor for Piqua City Schools. I remember my first ETR IEP meeting for my son. I walked in completely overwhelmed when I saw there were a ton of people there that I didn't know and not sure what they were there for. I wish I would have been warned about what to expect and someone to prep me on how to be prepared. I felt like a naive young girl walking into a school full of zombies. But don't worry, you won't have to fight any zombies, but I'm here to give you a few tips and let you know how you can make the most of these meetings. The school will make an attempt to schedule the meeting based on your availability. Call ahead if you have to reschedule or if you're going to be late, but don't be a no-show. It takes a lot of coordination for all the people to be present. We understand emergencies happen, just plan ahead best you can. Next, be an active participant. I know it's overwhelming, but they are there for you and your child. Your participation is needed and vital to ensure that a plan is in place on how to provide the best education for your kiddo. Limit phone usage and distractions during the meeting. We value your time. Be in the moment. And don't forget to complete any surveys or questionnaires sent home from school. These are important pieces to the puzzle during evaluations and IEP meetings. Your input is necessary to gain a holistic picture of your child. And next, write down any questions you have so that you can address them with the team. If you have several, don't be afraid to send them to school ahead of time so the staff can be prepared to help answer them with you. And last, do not be afraid to ask questions. There's a lot of jargon or words in special education that could be used that you have no clue what they mean or what they are. So speak up. Don't be afraid to ask what pragmatic language is or why your student might be pulled out of the classroom for physical therapy, just to name a few examples. If you don't understand or need clarification, just ask. Any of the folks at the table would be happy to explain or provide additional resources to you. Remember, you are a part of the team helping to teach your child and help them grow to their fullest potential. If you leave the room angry or confused, the school cannot read your mind and won't know how to help. They want to have a good working relationship with you. I'm Ashley Thoreen, the parent mentor for Piqua City Schools. If you have questions, need someone to talk to, or would like me to attend your meetings with you, please just reach out. I'm here to assist. All right. So hopefully you like that video. Lastly is just a couple of tips for everybody. So the first one I always say is stay organized. It can feel like you receive a million pieces of papers and reports from school, but those are important. So try putting everything in a binder as it comes in. Put one on top of the other. That way you have the most up-to-date information at the top, kind of chronological order. And check out a few tips from understood.org on how to stay organized. I'll add the link in the chat in just a minute. Next one is one of the most important things, and that is communication. Having open and honest conversations with how your child is doing at home and school is vital. So, if my son has a great morning or even maybe a rough morning, I'll shoot a message to his intervention specialist to let her know. If he's coming in and we had a rough morning, just to give her a heads up. So, she's not, she can adjust things if needed or give him an extra break, whatever it is that works best for them. Um, but Even if he's having a good morning, I might let her know that too. That way she can ask questions and facilitate conversation. But communication is the framework and the building point for all relationships. And even if you don't think of it this way, you're in a relationship with your child's teachers and the school and the educators. So think about it. You're both in a committed relationship to doing what's best for and educating your child. Next is the two-way communication, and that comes down to active listening. Don't listen to reply, listen to understand. So make sure that if you were maybe upset and you want to get your point across, sometimes it's easier to write things down and then review those before you hit send on an email. That way, you're making sure that you're getting everything out that you've won and it's in the best way possible. And I think that is the end of our presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and put that link for the Staying Organized binder in our chat. And I will stop our video so that way if we have any live questions from anybody, we can answer those. I can get my controls to do what I need to. Maybe.